In today's video, we have some updates on some key NHL prospects heading over to possibly play in Europe this season. We also have some big updates from Gary Bettman on next season. We also have some trade rumors today focusing on the Montreal Canadiens as well as the New York Islanders, which kind of include the possibility of Matt Barzal being an offer sheet candidate. We'll jump into all the latest news coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we have a variety of news today. Let's kick things off with a couple of updates on some prospects, which include one going to Europe temporarily while one might be staying. Senators defenseman Andreas Englund, who's been primarily an AHL defender, has seen some limited amount of NHL time, has signed a contract to play in Sweden next year, and it doesn't sound like it's just a loan agreement where he's going to go over there while waiting for next season. It sounds like he's actually signed and will be staying. Now, he is a restricted free agent defenseman, 24 years old. He's been in the Sens system for quite some time. At this point where he's not seeing regular NHL time and opportunity, it kind of makes sense why he may head back to play over there. So he very well might not even be tendered a qualifying offer by Ottawa. I guess we'll have to wait and see on that. But either way, it doesn't sound like he'll be playing in North America next year. Whether or not he returns, I guess it's hard to say once we need to find out more details on the status of that contract. Now, the other prospect here that's really interesting to see is that Montreal Canadiens forward Cole Caufield, their first-round pick from the 2018 NHL draft, appears to possibly be heading over to the SHL as well. Now, in the case of Cole Caufield, I would imagine that he probably would play there for the entire year, but he could have a loan agreement worked out where he could return to North America and participate in Montreal Canadiens training camp in the fall. Not really sure exactly how that's going to affect his status in school or whether or not he officially has to leave. I think there are some concessions being made in that regard. Now, apparently, Edmonton Oilers prospect Raphael Lavoie had gone over and apparently was being cut from that team that he's trying out for, and they're trying to replace him with Caufield. So obviously they're looking for a North American prospect to come over and fill a spot there, and I guess they weren't quite pleased enough with Lavoie that they're trying to get a higher level prospect. So Caufield could turn out to be that guy. Could turn out to be a great experience for him playing against older players. Good development opportunity for him to get ready for the NHL. We'll have to wait and get more details on this. This is not 100% confirmed, but there is a rumor that is close to making it official. So we'll see what happens here with Cole Caufield. But right now, things are indicating Sweden is where he'll play next year. Of course, yesterday was the first day of the Stanley Cup Final, and we get our annual Gary Bettman, basically State of the Union address, talking about the state of the league and where everything is at. We get some very key updates mostly on next year, and there was a lot of questions from the media regarding the 2020-21 NHL season, which certainly still has a lot of question marks. I know when the NHL announced its return to play, they had indicated that they were hoping to start back up to have training camps going by middle of November with the intent of starting for around December the 1st or early December start time. Gary Bettman did acknowledge that that date may have to be pushed back a little bit. Would not confirm anything, of course, because it's still probably a little bit early to tell. But he did speculate at least that the date was something that might have to move, and it could be moved back to later December or even into January. We may not end up calling next year 2021. It might just be the 2021 season, but he did say a few other key points as well. He still indicated that they fully intend, or at least trying to play a full 82-game schedule in playoffs. He also said that he doesn't want to push hockey too far into the summer like they are now, that obviously they want to do their best in the short term to get back to their normal hockey calendar. So obviously not wanting to push things too far into the summer next year is going to make it awfully difficult to get a full 82-game schedule in, even if they start it in December, considering we normally start in October. Like I said, they're going to end up playing a condensed schedule. I don't see how they can cram 82 games in unless they're willing to extend it and go further into the summer with likely an August end time at the very latest, August, September, like we're looking at here now. Not quite as late as this year, but still later than usual, and then probably take at least one more year to get everything back on track. Now, he also indicated as well that the Seattle franchise will not be delayed, that they're still coming in, obviously not the current year coming, but the one after. So for the 2021 season, 21-22, that is what is still planned. There's no change in that regard at all. And they did acknowledge as well that they may have no choice but to start next season with no fans again. but the intent would be to maybe do this probably in 3 phases. That if they start with no fans, they'd have to be able to project at least that by maybe a third way into the season, they could at least move to partial fans, and then hopefully do the final third of the season with either full or close to full arenas. That would be the intent, because the revenue that they generate from fans buying tickets and buying merchandise is about 50% of their total league revenue, and that's a lot of money to be losing. So obviously fans are not likely buying merchandise as much to the extent that they used to. A lot of that is purchased in the arenas at the games. Sponsorships would be impacted a lot as well, because obviously they can't have fans in arenas, which means they can't sell concessions and food and beer and all that stuff. So clearly there's a lot at risk here, a lot at stake, and the NHL has several ideas on the potential docket here for how things are going to work next year. I mean, there's been talk about multiple bubbles. There's been talk about an all-Canadian division if the U.S.-Canadian border is going to remain closed, which he would not really get into a whole lot. But either way, sounds like they're pretty determined, just like they were for this return to play, to have a season, to have it at least as close as possible to a full normal schedule. But like I said, that's going to have its challenges, and we'll have to see. But right now, they still seem optimistic that they'll be able to get underway here by January. Now, as I mentioned as well, we want to take a look at the Montreal Canadiens and the New York Islanders. Now, of course, the Islanders season recently came to an end. Obviously, many of these teams didn't have nearly the trade rumors or speculation about their offseason until the season was over. But in the case of the New York Islanders, they have some very interesting things to look at, and we've seen a few reports from their local media and writers on who cover the team since they've been eliminated here by Tampa. Now, they do have a few free agents that I would expect likely do not return, and when I say likely, I say almost a guarantee. Primarily, that's goaltender Thomas Greiss. They already have Varlamov and Sorokin under contract next year. Greiss is a UFA. They plan that out exactly for a reason. Greiss had a great season. He's been a pretty solid goalie for the Islanders the last little while, so I would fully expect he will not have trouble getting a contract to play somewhere else, but his time on the island is over. I would fully suspect as well that Derek Brassard likely doesn't return. He was a healthy scratch at times. Certainly had his moments where he played well, but never really worked his way up high in the lineup. And so because he was a healthy scratch at times, I would think that there's a good chance he doesn't come back either. But the key thing with the Islanders is right now they have between $8 and $9 million in cap space, but they have Pulock, Taves, and Barzal, all key restricted free agents, all going to be looking for a fairly substantial raise, most notably Matthew Barzal, who I don't know exactly what he's going to be looking for, but you know he's going to be looking for somewhere at least, I'm going to say somewhere between 8 to 10 million. I know that's a broad range, but you know, obviously he expects a lot. He had a phenomenal rookie season. The last 2 years, numbers are down a little bit, but the way the Islanders play with Barry Trotz's system, I can understand to a degree why that would be, but overall the team has had more success, so maybe that's overall better from the team perspective at least. But you know, this is going to be quite a challenge, and you can't help but wonder if Barzal would be a prime offer sheet candidate. Will we even see offer sheets this year? It certainly is debatable. We finally saw one last year for the first time in a long time by Montreal Canadiens GM Marc Bergevin on Sebastian Aho. I would think teams like the Islanders or the Lightning are probably the most susceptible to getting one this year. Now, Lou Lamoriello has made it known that if Barzal's offer sheeted, he will fully intend to match. But I would not expect a GM to really say anything any different. Now, we even heard Chris Johnston of Sportsnet probably about a week or more ago on a radio hit indicate that he wonders if Barzal would be open to signing an offer sheet, and that he might be hoping to get one to kind of end up like what Sebastian Aho did last year, to get the contract he wants and get it looked after quickly. So there is certainly some debate out there on what this is going to take to get it done. So even if they sign Barzal, regardless if they get it done on their own or if an offer sheet is presented and has to be matched, no matter how you shake it, he's going to get paid a lot of money. And they, like I said, they also have Pulock and Taves to sign, and they have a few other holes in their roster too. Like, there's no way they can get through what they have with the space they have and get all those guys under contract. They're going to have no choice but to make some trades, and I would think the prime trade candidates would be defensemen like Johnny Boychuk, maybe a Nick Leddy. One of those two guys likely departs because they have a substantial cap hit. You have to look to the forward group as well, and really they have a fair bit there with some no trade clauses. I would have suggested, maybe based on how he played, maybe a guy like a Jordan Eberle could find himself on the move, but at the same time, that's going to prove difficult based on the no trade clause. So like, they are somewhat limited on who they can move and who they can't. They're also going to have a new contract due for a guy like Anthony Beauvillier in a year's time. He'd be eligible for an extension, so they're certainly in a tough situation. They've had some really good team progress the past couple of years since Trotz and Lamoriello have taken over, but they're now in a position where their salary cap is going to force them to make trades, and they may have to move some pieces that they're not fond of, and at the same time puts them to be vulnerable to an offer sheet. So would Barzal sign an offer sheet? Based on what Chris Johnson was saying last week, he thinks it's at least possible. Obviously, if you look around the NHL, there's only a handful of teams who would have the space in the picks necessary to present a big-time one to him. And you're probably looking at a team again like Montreal, like last year, like Sebastian Aho, who we're going to talk about here next anyhow. So will Marc Bergevin do it again? Will any other GM have the cojones to take out an offer sheet this year? And would they go after a guy like Barzal, knowing how tight the Islanders are up against the cap? Let me know your thoughts on that potential scenario down in the comments, and we'll discuss further. Now, lastly here, I want to take a look at the Montreal Canadiens. As I mentioned, we have an article from TVA Sports I want to look at where they're outlining the fact that Marc Bergevin has made it known that he'd like to obtain a power forward who has some offensive upside to really change the look and makeup of their forward group. So TVA Sports kind of questioned what players he could go after, and some of these names are guys we've talked about in the past, which kind of makes sense. One of the more likely ones I think that would make a lot of sense, it wouldn't cost too much, would be a guy like Josh Anderson out of Columbus. I mean, he is coming off shoulder surgery, missed a lot of last year. There is some risk involved because of that, but if he can get back to being a 25 or plus goal scorer with the size and physicality he can bring, I think he could be a great fit for the Habs. Certainly the Habs are a smaller team. They have a lot of speed and skill, but they could use some grit, and they could use that size to really kind of give different looks here to their opponent. So ultimately, I think Anderson would be a good fit. If the Jackets are going to make that kind of trade, they're probably going to want a center in return, and the Habs are certainly known that either Domi or Danault could be possible trade bait this year. So I'm sure the Jackets would probably like one of them in return if they were going to make that kind of move. But there has been reports that Anderson does have a desire to stay in Columbus. The tipping point there might be, though, that he's going to want a longer-term contract, and he is a restricted free agent, so he does. Obviously, something has to be negotiated here, and if he wants a long-term deal, that they may not be comfortable with that. They may want something more short-term, and they have to ask the same question. Would Marc Bergevin want to trade for him and then ink him to a long-term contract? Might be a little risky given his recent health situation. So I guess we'll see on that. A couple other names that were brought up in this article that seemed interesting would be a guy like Anthony Mantha in Detroit, although I do think it's pretty unlikely that they're going to make that trade. I don't think Mantha's going anywhere out of the Red Wings organization, but I guess you never know. Again, Detroit would probably want a center. I mean, as much as they have some good-looking prospects, they're mostly wingers or defensemen, so they could use a top center as well. I'm not sure that Domi or Danault would really probably fit what they're looking for, but at the same time, I guess we can't completely rule it out, but I don't see a deal between Montreal and Detroit really making the most sense in that regard. And another name mentioned who does make sense to some degree would be a guy like Jordan Greenway. Now, if the Montreal Canadiens were to acquire Greenway from the Minnesota Wild, I would think that it would probably be part of a larger package. We've seen multiple players on both teams be mentioned in trade rumors. I don't see Greenway going to Montreal straight up for one of their centers like a Domi or Danault. I mean, we know that the Wild are looking for a center iceman, top six center for sure. Bill Guerin's made no secret about that. He also intends to possibly trade Matt Dumba either to get a top center or a top goaltender. I mean, obviously they're not going to be doing a goalie trade with Montreal. It would have to be a center would probably be the most sense in that regard, but I'm not really sure, again, that would kind of line up. But I mean, not one for one at least. I don't see doing like a Domi for Greenway deal, but they are the type of player who I think Montreal would be wise to look into adding into the mix, and we'll see. But out of all of them, I would probably try to do Josh Anderson. I would think the price tag wouldn't be that bad given how long he was out last year and the risk associated. And but the problem there, like I said, is the contract. He's going to want a long-term deal by the sounds of things, and that might prove difficult for any team to commit to right now. But I guess we'll have to wait and see what happens. But in your opinion, who should Montreal be looking to add as a forward? If they're going to go down the road of adding a power forward, which one do you think makes the most sense? And give me your mock trades down in the comments. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content. And give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.